Hi, my name is Leah Day, and I'm here with my husband Josh, and he is stitching out all sorts of wiggles into a house block from the Building Blocks Quilt Along. So let's get started.
Okay, I already knocked out the interior of the house here, and I actually took my time on this one because I'm feeling rushed, so I just took a few minutes to really lay out my path.
So you planned your quilting design in advance?
Yes, to minimize the travel stitching.
Excellent.
My goal here is to not travel stitch over any line more than twice.
If you can avoid it at all possible. Okay, that makes sense, and definitely taking that time has, I think, made an improvement too on your stitches.
Yes, and that and a lot of practice.
It looks really good. And I think just having that little extra time to think about it just kind of, it kind of lets you know what you're expecting, kind of going into maybe. I think it's looking really good. So at this point you're going to just kind of stitch in the ditch going up?
Yes, and then I'm going to stitch, and then when I come across here, I'm going to go fill in the
those
roof.
Wiggly U's in the roof. Okay.
Which I notice we'll get to it when I get down there. Just stitching the line here, and there's the roof, and here we go.
And these Wiggly U's are a nice kind of little practice, taster of what we're going to be doing, because there's a lot of stippling in this background, and by stitching these Wiggly U's you can kind of get into that kind of smooth, curvy mentality that you need for stippling. Now you chose to do this kind of working in the opposite direction that I usually work in. How is that feeling for you?
Oh, it feels great, and I think you've mentioned that before. I think that's largely due to the fact that I'm right-handed, and while you're left-handed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's just everybody works differently. That's looking good.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Right as you said that, I made a mistake.
Of course, right as I said it. But maybe you would have had more control if you had moved your hands just a little closer to the needle, because your hands were pretty wide apart on the block at that point.
Yes, yeah, you're right. I will work on that. Okay, and now I'm going to go out and do this stippling out in the
and I think your connection right
sky
here,
area.
if you kind of hit that connection line, and then you can start kind of wiggling down and then get to that ground area.
That looks good.
Yeah, it's one of those things, the more you stitch these blocks, the more you play with these designs, the more you'll be able to see these connections and kind of be able to flow seamlessly through these blocks. I, of course, stitched this background area freehand without the marks, and that's definitely open to you. If you can't mark your blocks, these kinds of much more dense stippling, it's much more challenging to mark your blocks. If you're not working with the pre-printed fabric, you don't have to mark this. You can always stitch it freehand. And sometimes that might make it a little easier if you've learned stippling and mastered it. It might be easier to stitch it off of the marked lines. However, if you don't have it mastered, if you don't kind of have it logged in, having those lines is kind of nice, so you don't have to guess and have to think too much as you're trying to fill it through the area. And there's just a little bit of travel stitching kind of pushed in here every once in a while. Like in this situation, you'll travel stitch down to this little line and then start the next little kind of section of stippling. That looks great.
And that speed is a lot more comfortable for me, because stippling, you can see I'm not on any line, and my goal here though is to keep everything in a curved circular shape instead of messing up and getting something sharp in there. I do not want a bird's beak.
No more bird's beaks. Okay. That is looking great. I think it all is down to your speed. And that's speed control, just coming in with your foot. And then now you've got just that last little part, and you'll just travel stitch down and connect there, and that will finish that off.
Actually, instead, I'm going to come down like this and go here, and that way follow the lines, and then that'll get me in a better position to start there.
That makes sense. Very good.
Being careful to stay on the lines.
And control that speed.
Okay, now I'm going to turn it upside down so I can have a better angle. Okay.
And while it's hard to believe, your hands have actually come closer to the needle. I really love and encourage everyone to go back and watch Josh's earliest videos. His hands were really spread wide apart. Largely, I think it's just kind of afraid of the foot and the movement of the needle. That's normal. It's totally normal. Where we place our hands for free motion is ever so slightly closer, and it is dangerous. Sometimes you can stitch through a needle through your finger or whatever. I've definitely heard of that happening. I've known people that has happened to. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to slowly build to, bringing your hands closer and closer as you feel comfortable and ready to do that. Okay, so now the little ground section wiggly use. And after that stippling, I bet this feels really easy, right?
Absolutely. You can see I'm staying a lot better on the line. Well, for the most part.
That looks great. Well, your hands are definitely shifting as you go, so maybe instead stop, make a conscious effort to stop and bring them closer, and then you won't have, that little out of control area really happen when your hands were further apart than they needed to be.
Yes, I have much more control here. You can still see it. I hate curves, no matter what. And
straight lines are much easier for you.
Yes. And you can see even my curves here are all blocky.
And that's another way to change up the design. You could turn all of those curves into straight lines and sharp angles and it would look just as good. So that's it for stitching all sorts of wiggles into one of our house blocks. So after it's all finished, how do you feel about it? Were you pretty happy with it?
Yeah, for the most part. The air stippling, though, I felt there was a lot of it, and in the end I kind of got tired, and you can see the worst part of the area, especially around the borders.
Well, at the same time, you did spend more time planning this block out. You took a look at the pattern and the design before you started stitching, and you kind of traced it with your finger, and you spent more time. You weren't as rushed. And I think that had a really good impact for the block. I think that really made a big difference.
It did. It's the more you travel stitch, the more possibility there is for mistakes. So I think the worst I had to do was over three times travel stitching, and that was a small area, so that wasn't too bad.
And for a block like this, where there's lots going on, that's pretty good. As these blocks get more complex and more different designs within each section, it really pays to spend a little time planning and thinking, to watch my video and watch Josh's video and the things that we talk about. We're not going to give you every piece of the puzzle. You've got to do some of this on your own and take a pencil or just trace it with your finger and kind of try and figure out what you're going to do. Have a game plan. This is exactly what's going to happen in your future quilts and quilts that you're going to quilt all on your own. You've got to just sit down and think and plan it out. There's no, it's not rocket science. It's not super difficult, but it is one of those steps that sometimes we don't take, and we need to learn how. So I hope that this encourages you to take your time, slow down a little bit, and plan before you get started quilting. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. You can pick up your pattern and join us as we learn how to piece and free motion quilt 42 beautiful blocks together. Find the pattern at leahday.com. You can also find pre-printed spoonflower cheater cloth fabric at spoonflower.com. Just search for Building Blocks and you'll find it. Until next time,
let's go quilt.